Men in fake police uniforms stood at my door, waving what they claimed was a legal warrant to seize part of my land. The one in front jabbed his finger into my chest and growled, "You will comply or face consequences," while staring at my faded Delta Force t-shirt with visible contempt. Little did they know I'd face down terrorists in situations where the stakes were life and death. After 20 years in Delta Force, these wannabe tough guys didn't even register on my threat radar. What happens when home association bullies push the wrong veteran too far? I never planned on having this kind of trouble in my retirement. After 20 years in Delta Force, I thought I'd earn some peace and quiet. My name's Jake Peterson, and at 45, I'd finally hung up my boots to settle down on the ranch my grandfather left me. It's a beautiful 15-acre spread just outside of town, perfect for a guy who'd spent too many years in desert combat zones and cramped forward operating bases. This land meant everything to my grandfather. He built it from nothing, working every day until his hands bled. "A man's land is sacred, Jake," he used to tell me. "It's the one thing nobody can take away from you." I guess he never encountered a power-hungry HOA. My property sits just outside the jurisdiction of the Cedar Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. Technically, they have zero authority over my land, but my ranch borders their main entrance road, and that's where the trouble started. I'll be honest, I never paid much attention to the HOA when I moved in. I was busy fixing up the old barn, establishing a small shooting range out back, and finally sleeping through the night without waking up in a cold sweat. That faded Delta Force t-shirt became my daily uniform, comfortable, worn in, and a reminder of who I am. I should tell you about my military background because it matters to what happened later. As a Delta Force commander, I led some of the most complex hostage rescue and counterterrorism operations across 3 continents. My specialty was threat assessment and tactical patience, knowing when to wait and when to strike. I negotiated with warlords, outwitted terrorist cells, and brought my men home alive from situations most folks couldn't imagine in their worst nightmares. The Cedar Ridge HOA was run by a board of 5 members, led by their president, Richard Keller, a retired corporate executive with too much time on his hands and an inflated sense of importance. From what I gathered, the community had started as a friendly neighborhood, but over the years, Keller had turned it into his personal fiefdom. While I kept to myself, I'd hear stories from people in town about ridiculous fines for grass being half an inch too tall or shutters painted the wrong shade of beige. Things started off friendly enough. About 3 months after I'd settled in, my elderly neighbor, Martha, stopped by with a pie. Sweet lady, husband passed from cancer 2 years back. She mentioned she'd been hit with a $500 fine because her mailbox was not in compliance with community standards. At 78, living on a fixed income, this was devastating for her. I took a look at the HOA charter she showed me and immediately spotted the problem. Their jurisdiction ended 3 properties down from hers. They had no authority to fine her at all. I helped her draft a simple letter citing the property boundaries defined in the county records, and just like that, the fine disappeared. Martha was overjoyed, and I felt good about helping a neighbor. But I didn't realize I'd just made my first enemy. Richard Keller doesn't like being proven wrong. That small victory would turn out to be the beginning of something much bigger than I could have anticipated. But as any good tactician knows, sometimes the smallest skirmish can reveal your enemy's true nature. The first real confrontation happened on a Tuesday morning in April. I was repairing a section of fence when a black SUV pulled up to my gate. Out stepped Richard Keller and 2 other HOA board members. They were dressed like they were heading to a country club, pressed khakis, polo shirts, and expressions of practiced concern. "Mr. Peterson," Keller said, not bothering to wait for an invitation to enter my property, "we need to discuss the community expansion plan." I wiped my hands on my jeans and straightened up. "Good morning to you too, Mr. Keller." He unrolled a large blueprint on my fence post. "The association is planning to widen the main entrance road. It would require using about 20 feet of your property line. He pointed to a section of my land that contained my grandfather's old oak tree and part of the creek. "That's not going to happen," I said calmly. "We're prepared to offer compensation," one of the other men said, a real estate agent named Bradley. "I'm not interested in compensation. That land isn't for sale at any price." Keller's friendly facade slipped for just a moment. "Mr. Peterson, you need to understand that this expansion will benefit everyone. Property values will increase." "My property isn't part of your HOA," I reminded him, "and that oak tree was planted by my grandfather when he returned from World War II. It stays where it is." "We can work around one tree," Keller said dismissively. "You're not working around anything because you're not getting my land. This conversation is over." They left with tight smiles and promises to be in touch. I went back to mending my fence, but something in Keller's expression told me this wasn't over. A week later, the first letter arrived. It was printed on official-looking HOA letterhead, citing me for multiple violations and demanding I attend the next board meeting. I tossed it in the trash. Then came another and another, each one more threatening than the last. These were followed by notices of fines: $250 for excessive noise, $500 for improper waste disposal, $750 for unauthorized structure. All of this was completely illegal, of course. I wasn't part of their HOA, had signed no agreement, and they had zero authority over my property. After the fifth letter, I drove into town and spoke with the lawyer, Jacob Winters, who specialized in property disputes. "They're trying to intimidate you," Jacob said after reviewing the letters. "It's not uncommon. HAs sometimes try to extend their reach, especially when they want something." "So I can ignore them legally?" "Yes, but practically, these situations can escalate. I document everything, keep all communications, take photos of your property regularly to show you're not violating any county codes, and consider installing security cameras." The next day, I ordered a comprehensive security system, 8 cameras covering every approach to my property, motion sensors, and automatic recording. As a Force Recon Marine before Delta, I'd learned the value of perimeter security. I also started carrying a small audio recorder whenever I was working outside. That's when the rumors started. At the grocery store, people would suddenly go quiet when I walked by. At the hardware store, the owner pulled me aside. "Just wanted to let you know some folks from Cedar Ridge are spreading stories about you," he said quietly, saying you're unstable, dangerous, PTSD stuff. I told them it was bull, but thought you should know. This wasn't just annoying anymore, it was personal. They were trying to use my military service against me, painting me as some unhinged veteran. The irony wasn't lost on me. My training was the very thing keeping me calm and methodical in response to their harassment. Instead, I focused on strengthening my position and gathering intelligence. One evening, reviewing my security footage, I discovered something that changed everything. 2 men in Cedar Ridge Estates polo shirts were caught dumping garbage along my property line at 5:30 a.m. I recognized one as Bradley, the real estate agent, but it was what they were saying that really got my attention. "Keller is obsessed with this guy," Bradley said, tossing a bag of trash over my fence. "I know it's getting weird," replied the other man. "Did you know Peterson's old unit was the one that got that security contract in Baghdad, the one Keller's company lost out on?" "You're kidding me." "Nope. Keller's company bid on it, but Peterson's recommendation went to another contractor. Cost Keller's company millions. He recognized the name as soon as Peterson moved in. So this wasn't just about my land. This was personal. A vendetta from years ago. I'd evaluated security contractors as part of my final assignment, and apparently, Keller's company hadn't made the cut for good reason: substandard equipment and inflated prices. I made copies of the footage and sent them to the county commissioner's office with a formal complaint about illegal dumping. I also made sure my lawyer got copies of everything. The first round had gone to the HOA, but I was just getting started. In tactical operations, intelligence is everything, and now I knew exactly what I was dealing with. The Cedar Ridge Estates Community Center was packed for the monthly HOA meeting. I wasn't supposed to know what happened there, but Martha's grandson worked as the janitor and left his phone recording in a supply closet. What I heard confirmed everything. Peterson is becoming a problem we can no longer ignore. Keller's voice was clear on the recording. He's obstructing community progress and setting a dangerous precedent. He's not even part of the HOA, a woman objected. Legally, we have no standing. That's a technicality, Keller dismissed her. His property affects our community aesthetic and property values. More importantly, his defiance is encouraging others, like the Williams family, refusing to repaint their door. Someone asked, exactly. One bad apple spoils the bunch. Besides, I have connections in the county zoning office, connections I'm not afraid to use. Peterson may think he's untouchable because he was some hotshot in the military, but he'll learn that things work differently in the civilian world. The meeting devolved into a strategic planning session on how to force me to comply. Options ranged from legal harassment to more creative measures. What troubled me most was how many neighbors stayed silent, neither objecting nor supporting the increasingly hostile plans. The next few weeks brought a new level of harassment. My water supply was mysteriously tampered with twice. Someone had opened the main valve on my property line, flooding part of my yard. Anonymous complaints were filed with various county offices, building code violations, environmental concerns, noise complaints. Late-night drive-bys became common, vehicles with high beams pointed at my house, sometimes honking, sometimes just idling. I recognized several Cedar Ridge residents behind the wheels. The campaign to label me as unstable intensified. I learned from my lawyer that someone had contacted the VA to suggest I was a danger to myself and others. Through it all, I maintained my tactical discipline. No reactions, no confrontations, just documentation, security upgrades, and patience. My training had taught me that emotional responses only benefit your adversary. Instead, I focused on strengthening my position and gathering intelligence. The breaking point came unexpectedly. I'd installed a small camera near Martha's property after she mentioned feeling watched. The footage captured Keller himself threatening her over her support of me. Your property could face reassessment, he told the elderly woman. Tax values have a way of increasing when properties aren't properly maintained. At your age, maybe assisted living would be easier than keeping up a house. I edited the video, blurring Martha's face but leaving Keller's clearly visible, and sent it to every homeowner in Cedar Ridge Estates with a simple note. Is this how you want your community represented? Within days, it had spread throughout the county. People were outraged, and Keller was furious. Then came an unexpected ally. A woman named Rebecca Lang knocked on my door one evening. I recognized her from the HOA board. I shouldn't be here, she said nervously, but you need to know Keller is planning something drastic. He's recruited some men to enforce HOA policies. They've been meeting at his house, talking about warrants and citations. I think they're planning to impersonate officials. Thanks for the warning, I said, offering her coffee, which she declined. I've lived here 10 years, she said. This isn't what our community was supposed to be about. She left quickly, looking over her shoulder. That night, I reviewed my security system and added a few enhancements. In Delta, we had a saying, prepare for what you know, plan for what you don't. I knew they were coming. I just didn't know exactly how or when. I didn't have to wait long. My security cameras captured 3 men at Keller's house the next evening. They were trying on what looked like security uniforms and examining fake badges. One was Gary Thompson, a failed police academy applicant. Another was Steve Mercer, a former mall security guard fired for harassment. The third was Bill Daniels, Keller's brother-in-law. They practiced aggressive poses and rehearsed lines about community authority and legal right to inspect. As I watched them play act their power fantasy, I almost felt sorry for them. They had no idea what they were walking into. In my years of service, I'd learned that the most dangerous people aren't those who make threats. They're the ones who quietly prepare. And I was very, very prepared. 3 days later, they made their move. My perimeter alert pinged at 2:15 p.m. An unmarked white SUV with a magnetic light bar hastily attached to the roof pulled up to my gate. The light was flashing, but there was no siren. On my security monitor, I watched the 3 officers I'd seen at Keller's house exit the vehicle. They wore dark blue uniforms with patches that read community enforcement and cheap badges that wouldn't fool anyone with actual law enforcement experience. Gary Thompson, the failed police academy applicant, was clearly in charge. He carried a clipboard with official-looking papers. I switched my security system to active recording and called the county sheriff's office. "This is Jake Peterson at 1452 County Road 8. 3 men impersonating law enforcement officers are attempting to access my property with falsified documents. I believe this is related to an ongoing harassment campaign by the Cedar Ridge Estates HOA. The dispatcher assured me deputies would be there within 15 minutes. I thanked her and prepared for my visitors. The pounding on my door was unnecessarily aggressive. I took a deep breath, straightened my faded Delta Force t-shirt, and opened the door with a calm expression. "Mr. Peterson," Thompson thrust a document into my face. "By the authority of the Cedar Ridge Estates Community Enforcement Division, we are here to serve this warrant for inspection and potential seizure of property in violation of community standards." He was red-faced and breathing heavily, either from nervousness or excitement. The other 2 flanked him, trying to look intimidating but failing miserably. Steve Mercer's hand kept drifting to his hip, where a real officer would carry a weapon, though thankfully he wasn't armed. I didn't take the paper. Instead, I looked Thompson directly in the eyes. "Good afternoon, gentlemen. May I see some identification, please?" This simple, standard request seemed to fluster him. "We are the official enforcement arm of the Cedar Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. This warrant grants us. That's not identification," I said calmly. "I'd like to see your law enforcement credentials." "We have community authority," Bill Daniels chimed in, his voice cracking slightly. I finally took the document from Thompson's hand and glanced at it. It was impressively official looking at first glance, embossed letterhead, stamps, signatures, but the errors were immediately obvious to anyone familiar with legal documents. The jurisdiction was cited as Pine Creek County. It referenced statutes that were completely fabricated, and the judge's signature was for Honorable Judge James Marshall. No such judge served in our county. "Interesting document," I said, keeping my tone conversational. "Did you know that impersonating law enforcement officers is a felony in this state? Carries up to 5 years imprisonment." Thompson's confident expression faltered. "We're not impersonating police. We're HOA enforcement. With fake badges, unauthorized emergency lights, and a falsified warrant." I gestured to their vehicle. "Those magnetic lights are illegal on civilian vehicles when used to imply law enforcement authority." "Listen, Peterson," Thompson stepped closer, jabbing his finger at my chest. "You can cooperate, or things can get difficult. Your choice." I remained perfectly still, maintaining eye contact. Years of hostage negotiations had taught me the power of controlled body language. Before you make any more statements, you should know 2 things. First, this entire conversation is being recorded by multiple security cameras. I pointed to a camera mounted discreetly above my door. All 3 men reflexively looked up. Second, I've already contacted the actual sheriff's department. They're on their way now. Thompson's face drained of color, but he tried to maintain his facade. "We have every right." "No, you don't," I said firmly. "My property is not part of Cedar Ridge Estates. The HOA has no jurisdiction here. What you're doing right now is criminal trespassing, impersonation of law enforcement, attempted intimidation, and conspiracy to violate my civil rights. Would you like to come inside while we wait for the real authorities to arrive?" The unexpected invitation clearly threw them off balance. People confronted with intimidation tactics don't usually invite their intimidators in for a chat. Thompson looked to his companions, uncertainty evident in his expression. I think that would be a good idea, I added. After all, we have some things to discuss about Richard Keller's involvement in this operation. At the mention of Keller's name, Daniels visibly flinched. The cracks in their confidence were beginning to show. They followed me inside hesitantly, like wolves suddenly realizing they'd wandered into a lion's den. My living room walls were adorned with military commendations, photographs with generals and diplomats, and a shadow box containing my Delta Force insignia and medals. Have a seat, I offered, gesturing to the couch. None of them moved. Thompson cleared his throat. Look, Peterson, we're just following procedures here. Whose procedures? I asked, because they're certainly not legal ones. I set the fake warrant on my coffee table. This document isn't worth the paper it's printed on. The court seal is from an online template. The judge doesn't exist, and even if this were a real warrant, you have no authority to serve it. We represent the Homeowners Association, Mercer insisted, though with noticeably less conviction. I looked directly at him. Don't I know you from somewhere, Mr. Mercer? Weren't you a security guard at Westfield Mall until last year? His eyes widened in surprise. How did you were fired for harassing female shoppers, as I recall. Quite a few complaints. I turned to Thompson. And you, Mr. Thompson, failed the police academy psychological evaluation twice, isn't that right? Something about concerning power dynamics in your assessment. Their shock was palpable. I'd done my homework after Rebecca's warning. What is this? Thompson demanded, his voice rising. Have you been investigating us? Let's call it due diligence, I replied. In my former line of work, it was important to know who was watching you. I walked over to my desk and retrieved a folder. I also have some interesting information about your association with Richard Keller and his brother-in-law here. Daniels started edging toward the door. This is ridiculous. We're leaving. I wouldn't recommend that, I said. The sheriff's deputies will be here any minute. Leaving the scene would just add fleeing to your charges. Thompson's composure cracked. He stepped toward me aggressively. You think you're so smart with your military background and your cameras. You can't prove anything. Actually, came a voice from my laptop. He can prove quite a bit. All three men turned toward the sound. On my computer screen was Jacob Winters, my attorney. Gentlemen, I'm Jacob Winters, Mr. Peterson's attorney. I've been on conference call since you arrived and have been recording this entire conversation with Mr. Peterson's permission. This is a single-party consent state for recording, in case you were wondering. Thompson's face went from red to white. You had no right. I had every right, I interrupted, just as I had every right to investigate why 3 civilians were impersonating law enforcement to harass me. I walked to my window as the sound of sirens became audible in the distance. That would be the sheriff now. But before they arrive, I want to show you something else. I handed each of them a printed page. On it was their personal information, home addresses, phone numbers, employment histories, and connections to Keller. What the hell is this? Daniels sputtered. Insurance, I said calmly. You've been harassing me for months. Did you think I wouldn't prepare? I've documented everything. The garbage dumping, the water tampering, the late-night drive-bys, the false reports. I have dates, times, vehicle descriptions, photographs. We weren't part of any of that, Mercer protested weakly. Perhaps not personally, I acknowledged, but you're here now as part of the same organized harassment campaign. You're wearing fake uniforms, carrying fake badges, and attempting to serve a fake warrant. I folded my arms and looked at each of them in turn. I faced down insurgents with actual weapons and terrorist cells with actual bombs. You're just 3 men who made very poor decisions today. The question is, what are you going to do now? Thompson's aggressive facade finally collapsed completely. Keller assured us this was legal. He said the HOA had special jurisdiction that superseded normal property boundaries. He said you were threatening community safety and property values. And you believe that? I asked incredulously. He had documents, legal opinions, Daniels added desperately. Let me guess, I said, all on Cedar Ridge letterhead, all signed by people you never met or spoke to directly. Their silence was confirmation enough. Outside, sheriff's vehicles pulled up to my gate. I was a hostage negotiator for part of my career, I told them. I learned that most people who get caught in bad situations have an exit strategy. Right now, your best exit strategy is complete honesty with the sheriff about who put you up to this. Otherwise, Keller will let you take the fall while he walks away clean. The sound of car doors slamming outside signaled the arrival of law enforcement. Thompson looked at his companions, then back at me. He promised there wouldn't be any consequences. He said you were just an unstable vet who needed to be put in your place. I nodded. That sounds like Keller. The man who never dirties his own hands. As the sheriff's knock sounded at my door, I saw the moment when all three men realized just how thoroughly they'd been manipulated and how completely they were now trapped by their own choices. Sheriff Thornton was a 20-year veteran of law enforcement, a no-nonsense professional with a reputation for fairness. He took one look at the three men in their fake uniforms and shook his head in disbelief. Impersonating law enforcement officers, he said, examining their badges. That's a bold move, gentlemen. I handed him the fake warrant. They attempted to serve this, claiming authority to inspect and seize portions of my property. The sheriff scanned the document and raised an eyebrow. Judge James Marshall? There's no such judge in this county. He looked at Thompson. Where did you get this? Thompson hesitated, then deflated visibly. Richard Keller provided it, he said. It was legitimate. Mr. Keller of the Cedar Ridge HOA, the sheriff clarified. Yes, sir, Mercer chimed in, apparently eager to cooperate now. He's been orchestrating this whole thing. Said Peterson was a problem that needed solving. I provided the sheriff with my digital evidence, footage of the three men at Keller's house rehearsing their intimidation tactics, the recording of our conversation, and documentation of the month-long harassment campaign. This is extensive, Sheriff Thornton remarked, scrolling through the files on my laptop. You've been thorough, Mr. Peterson. Force of habit, I replied. Threat assessment was part of my job for 20 years. As the deputies began processing the three men, taking their fake badges and documenting their uniforms, a familiar black SUV pulled up to my gate. Richard Keller had arrived. He strode toward my house with the confidence of someone who expected to control the situation. The shock on his face when he saw the sheriff's vehicles was priceless. What's going on here? He demanded, approaching the sheriff. Why are my community officers being detained? Community officers? Sheriff Thornton repeated. There's no such thing, Mr. Keller. These men were impersonating law enforcement officers and attempting to serve a fraudulent warrant. There must be some misunderstanding, Keller said smoothly. They're simply part of our neighborhood watch program. If they overstepped? I interrupted. They claimed legal authority they don't have, presented falsified documents, and attempted to intimidate me into surrendering property rights. That's a bit more than overstepping. Keller's eyes narrowed as he looked at me. Peterson, always making mountains out of molehills. These men were just doing their job. Sheriff Thornton stepped between us. Their job appears to be criminal activity, Mr. Keller, and according to their statements, you directed them to do it. That's absurd, Keller scoffed. I never told them to impersonate officers or create fake documents. Thompson, handcuffed and leaning against a patrol car, called out, What about the badges you ordered online and the uniforms you paid for? And the warrant you had printed on that special paper? The color drained from Keller's face. They're lying, he insisted. We have a search warrant for your residence and office, Mr. Keller, Sheriff Thornton said, producing a document, a real one this time, based on evidence Mr. Peterson provided regarding an ongoing harassment campaign. This is outrageous, Keller sputtered. Peterson is the problem here. He's been undermining community standards, threatening property values by existing on my own property. That isn't part of your HOA, I asked mildly. Your property affects our community aesthetic, Keller snapped, losing his composure entirely. You think you're special because you were in the military? This is civilian life, Peterson. Different rules apply. Yes, Sheriff Thornton agreed. Laws apply. Like the laws against criminal harassment, impersonating law enforcement, falsifying legal documents, and conspiracy. As if on cue, another vehicle pulled up, a county SUV with the seal of the commissioner's office. Commissioner Helen Grant stepped out, her expression grim. Mr. Peterson, she greeted me. I received your evidence package. I want to personally apologize for what you've endured. This type of behavior has no place in our county. She turned to Keller. Richard, the county board will be conducting a full investigation into Cedar Ridge Estates' HOA practices. Based on preliminary findings, there appear to be numerous violations of state HOA regulations. You can't do that, Keller protested. We're a private organization that operates under county and state laws, Commissioner Grant countered, laws you've apparently been ignoring for quite some time. As the deputies led Keller to a patrol car for further questioning, Martha appeared at my gate. The elderly woman watched the scene unfold with a mixture of shock and satisfaction. Is it over? She asked me quietly. I put a gentle hand on her shoulder. Justice sometimes takes time, Martha, but it usually arrives eventually. The commissioner approached us. We're implementing new county regulations next month to prevent HOA overreach. Your case helped bring these issues to light, Mr. Peterson. As the various vehicles departed, patrol cars with Keller and his 3 officers, deputies heading to execute the search warrant at Keller's home, a strange peace settled over my property. For the first time in months, it felt truly mine again. In the weeks that followed, justice moved with surprising speed. The local newspaper ran a front-page story about the HOA police scandal. Keller and his 3 recruits faced multiple charges, including criminal harassment, impersonating law enforcement, and conspiracy. The Cedar Ridge Estates HOA underwent a complete restructuring. Rebecca Lang, the board member who had warned me, was elected as the new president on a platform of transparency and respect for property rights. Her first act was to formally acknowledge that my land was outside their jurisdiction and to issue a public apology for the harassment campaign. Several homeowners approached me about forming a neighborhood alliance based on mutual support rather than rigid rules and fines. It wasn't an HOA, just neighbors looking out for each other, the way communities used to function. As for me, I finally got back to the peaceful retirement I'd been seeking. The barn was finished, the fences mended, and my grandfather's oak tree continued to thrive, unthreatened by expansion plans or power-hungry bureaucrats. I did make one small addition to my property, though. At the entrance to my driveway, I installed a new sign. It reads, "Private property. Trespassers will regret it." And below that, "Former Delta Force Commander on site." Standing at my property line one evening, I watched as a realtor hammered a "for sale" sign into the lawn of Keller's now empty house. The former HOA president had decided to pursue opportunities elsewhere after his legal troubles began. Some men spend their lives bullying others because they've never faced real consequences. I spent my career ensuring that those who threatened American freedom faced justice. Today was no different. And to any other HOA tyrants watching, remember, you never know what veteran's door you might be knocking on next.